Before we get into today's video, I wanted to talk to you about a Kickstarter for a comic called Terminus Veil. Terminus Veil is a type of story that's a throwback to a lot of different things that I love from both comics and manga and anime. Things like Ghost in the Shell, Psychopaths, Ergo Proxy, more cerebral stories that dig more to the government ops and conspiracies of things. And I'm also a huge fan of comics like Wetworks and Wildcats and Youngblood from back in the 90s. And this is like the perfect marriage of all that. Terminus Veil is a story about a group of government operatives who call themselves the Guardians, and this comic envelops itself around the theme of high-tech weapons espionage, and the Guardians are here to stop whoever's behind it. And some of the Guardians might even be in on it. If this sounds like anything of interest to you, go check out the link in the description as well as a pinned comment below. Go check out the Kickstarter because it is a really awesome comic. I've already gotten to read most of the issues that are on offer. You can pick up a volume 1 of the entirety of the series released so far, which includes all 4 issues of Terminus Veil. If this sounds like anything of interest to you, go check out those links. What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about X-Men Red number 13 by Al Ewing and Jacopo Cammagni. Mutant Civil War is coming to the Marvel Comics universe, and it is not going to be pretty for anyone involved. With the Hellfire Gala coming up in just one more week, we know that Krakoa is screwed right now, and we already know that the combined might of Mother Righteous, Dr. Stasis, Nimrod, Omega Sentinel, Fei Long, and MODOK, the Covenant Kaba, and a litany of other villains are all coming together to fall upon Krakoa and destroy everything. But Genesis, the wife of Apocalypse, is also bearing down on Krakoa. She is even working in tandem with Orcus as well, and I think it's a fact that a lot of people forget about sometimes, that Orcus, by way of the Covenant Kaba, is aiding Genesis in her war against what is the new direction of Arakko. I talked about this in my previous video for X-Men Red number 12, but Genesis is not pleased with the direction that Arakko has taken. The fact that Arakko was removed from its place on Earth and then transported to another planet altogether where they could, quotey fingers, do no harm. She is not okay with the fact that Storm has led a revolutionary movement on Arakko that has changed the strength over all else mentality that Iraqi mutants have long believed in and followed for centuries, if not millennia. The idea that a mutant could ask another person for help is a grave sin in the eyes of old Arakko, which is exactly how Genesis sees it. Some of Storm's greatest accomplishments as of late, while in some cases have in fact been her own accomplishments, the idea that Genesis is looking at is that some of Storm's other great accomplishments, some of the things that are being touted as the reason why she is the person who should lead Arakko going forward, some of those things are actions that she needed someone else's help to carry out. One of those being the destruction of the Eternal Uranos. While technically she was instrumental in helping destroy Uranos, she needed the help of Magneto to do it. And not only did she defeat Vulcan not once, but twice, but that second victory is tainted in Genesis's eyes by one thing: the fact that she needed her fellow Omega level mutants like Lodos Logos, as well as Subanar of the Depths, in order to cement her victory over Vulcan. Not only that, but Storm spends her time jumping backwards and forwards between Arakko and Krakoa, and there have been moments in Arakko's very short stint being on the planet of Mars that she has not been around for some of their greatest defeats. And this is seen as cowardice in the eyes of Genesis. This is why she feels that Storm is not the way forward. That Genesis is the only way forward. And not only is Genesis the only way forward, so too is the helm, or rather the staff, of Annihilation, a sentient weapon that we've talked about a great deal over the course of some of the last couple of videos when we were discussing X-Men Red. But the general idea here is that if you are someone who is not as terribly familiar with what this entity is, Annihilation, think of it as nothing more than a weaponized version of the One Ring from Lord of the Rings. And we've seen in this that while Genesis seems to not necessarily be immune to the manipulations and machinations of the staff of Annihilation, it is still able to sow lies and deceit and discord wherever it is present. And we see throughout multiple points in this issue, whenever Genesis is talking with the other members of the Great Ring, some of whom she is more than ready to challenge and defeat, at various points the staff says something, and the rest of the room, while they're not sure if they heard something, we see that Aura Sarada seems to notice that somebody is speaking, but she can't really tell where it's coming from. Everyone else is hearing this too, and whatever the staff of Annihilation says almost seems to just naturally occur in all the members of the Great Ring. The staff of Annihilation is instrumental in helping change Subanar of the Depth's mind about Storm in the direction of Arakko. It's also instrumental in galvanizing Subanar to fight Storm, someone who he initially saw as an ally and even believed in her idea of changing the way Arakko does things going forward. But there is one person on the Great Ring of Arakko that not only does Annihilation not seem to be able to sway, and Genesis herself might even be afraid of, and that's you becoming one of Earth's mightiest subscribers. Becoming one of Earth's mightiest subscribers ensures that Genesis does not take over Arakko, because there will be yet a champion to face off against her. And not only that, the more of you who subscribe, that increases the ranks of Earth's mightiest subscribers to the point where Genesis will go running back to her hole in a mint and will tell Apocalypse that she is sorry for having broken his heart. Not only that, while you're here, because if you are still here by this point, I think it's safe to say you probably at least like the video, and if you do, go ahead and click that like button too. But no, in all seriousness, there's one person on Arakko that Genesis just doesn't seem to want the smoke from, and it's not Storm. She seems more than ready to fight Storm. She has an almost, I would dare say, deep lack of respect for Storm, not just as the leader of Arakko, but just as a person in general. It just doesn't seem like she really cares that Storm is the one who's been leading this ship for the last while and has, for all intents and purposes, changed Arakko for the better. And yet, Genesis doesn't care about her challenge. But there's one person she does seem to not want smoke from, and that is Lactuca of the Stars. Lactuca of the Stars is probably the one member of the Great Ring of Arakko we have not spent really any major amount of time with. All we know is that Lactuca is incredibly powerful. Lactuca's power is something that, honestly, I don't even know how you define it in a way that would make sense to anyone. All we can really say is that her power is described as knowing where everything is at all times. No matter who it is, what it is, or where it is, Lactuca always knows. And we have seen Lactuca use this ability to even go as far as to transport Arakko from Earth to Mars. So it seems like whatever it is Lactuca knows, even if it's something that's not necessarily true at the time, it seems like Lactuca is able to just assume the knowledge of something, like case in point, the location of Arakko. And something tells me that Lactuca's ability, much like we've seen with characters like Iska the Unbeaten, is something that can strike fear into the hearts of characters as strong and as brave and as unflinching as Genesis. Because when Genesis challenges Kobak Neverheld to a duel to reclaim her original seat on the Great Ring of Arakko, which is the seat of victory, this was the seat that once belonged to Genesis before it was turned over to Iska the Unbeaten when Genesis had become one with Annihilation, and now Kobak Neverheld sits at this seat. Therefore, she wants it back from him. Not only does Kobak answer the challenge, but also John Ironfire, the recently returned character we were first introduced to in Sins of Sinister, has also challenged Genesis in the Great Ring, as well as Storm having also stepped up to the plate, but for the most part being ignored by Genesis, but Subanar of the Depths deciding to challenge Storm instead. Lotus Logos is able to convince Lactuca of the Stars to change the playing field in some way, because he, like everyone else, knows how Lactuca's powers work. He is trying to convince Lactuca to intervene, to do something about all of this, because once again, Lactuca knows everything. And if Lactuca does in fact know everything, that means they know how all of this is going to play out. They know the future in regards to this very moment. And I think it's safe to say that Lactuca is keenly aware that maybe Kobach and Storm and John Ironfire would probably not win their challenges at this precise moment in time, that maybe they would probably die if they were to challenge Genesis now, or maybe they know that they could win, but potentially not right now, maybe later. Whatever the case is, Lactuca teleports Kobach Neverheld, Lotus Logos, that which was Zelo, John Ironfire, and Storm somewhere else, and we don't know where that is, but what we do know is that Lactuca is aware of how all this plays out and kind of knows how to get around Genesis's way of thinking, even at one point saying the staff of Annihilation is tipping the balance in a way that is not in anyone else's favor, that it's manipulating things from behind the scenes, even taking Genesis's own words that only the strong survive, and technically if Storm and the rest of the gang are to survive this moment, even if it is by quotey fingers running away, that in and of itself is strength. But that doesn't really seem to make a whole heap of a lot of sense, at least right now at this particular point in time. But I just feel like Lactuca knows exactly what needs to happen in order for Genesis to not win what is about to be a mutant civil war between Arrako and Krakoa. Regardless of all this, Lactuca is the one that Genesis doesn't seem very interested in challenging, because if Lactuca knows everything, that means Lactuca knows how to defeat Genesis. And Genesis seems to be keenly aware of this, because when Lactuca, for all intents and purposes, says, "Come get some," Genesis doesn't even respond and lets the staff keep the conversation going in a different direction, focusing on the fact that Storm and the rest had quotey fingers run. Genesis wants her war and she wants her land back, and she's gonna do it by any means necessary. She doesn't care who she has to step on to get it, though I do think the last person she wants to mess with is Lactuca. War is coming, and Genesis is more than prepared to unleash her children, the original recipe for Horsemen of the Apocalypse, as well as the Amenthi Horde, upon Arakko to take it back. And I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that some of the other members of the Great Ring of Arakko, like Aura Sarada, Subanar of the Depths, and presumably Lycaean Two Wolves, are going to be in line with Genesis. It is also safe to say that Genesis is not going to take the seat of dreams. Someone else is very likely going to take that seat, because it is yet to have been refilled. Genesis is very likely taking back her seat, the seat of victory, since Kobach Neverheld is not there to hold it, and this is usually a pretty big deal, because when Arakko goes to war, the seat of victory is the one who is always consulted on this and usually takes charge in wartime matters. The only thing I'm not certain about is where John Ironfire and Storm and the rest of the gang are. If I had to take a wild guess, I'm gonna say they're probably back on Earth on Krakoa. That seems like the most likely place for Lactuca to send Storm in order to get help to warn the rest of mutant kind about what Genesis is about to do. But anyway, that's everything I really wanted to talk about with X-Men Red number 13. If you enjoyed this video, do the YouTube thing, like, share, comment, subscribe, and make sure you tap that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the videos that I put out. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and until next time, let me know what you thought about X-Men Red number 13. Keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.